Look at the clock on your wall, or your phone, or your wrist. Look at the minute hand. Watch it move. Watch it sweep through the space between one number and the next, dividing the hour into 60 equal pieces, each one a container for a specific amount of your life. 60 seconds per minute, 60 minutes per hour. Every meeting you attend, every shift you work, every class you sit through, every deadline you meet or miss, every parking meter, every microwave timer, every billable increment of professional labor on Earth is measured by that hand. Now try to imagine life without it, not without clocks, without the minute hand, because for the first 500 years of mechanical timekeeping in Europe, from roughly 1280 to 1680, clocks had one hand. One, the hour hand. It pointed to the approximate hour. It told you it was about 3 o'clock, or roughly 7:30, or somewhere near noon. It did not tell you it was 3:17. It could not tell you it was 3:17. The technology was not precise enough, and the concept was not necessary. Minutes, as a unit of daily life, did not exist. Not because people were stupid, not because the technology was primitive and everyone was waiting for someone to make it better, because nobody needed a minute. For 4 centuries of mechanical clockmaking, nobody needed to know the time more precisely than the nearest quarter hour. The hour was sufficient. The approximate was enough. Human life operated at a resolution that the hour hand could serve. And then, within a single generation, the minute hand appeared, and everything changed. The deeper I went into why it appeared when it did, the more I found that the minute hand was not a natural evolution of timekeeping. It was a specific tool, built for a specific purpose, arriving at a specific moment, serving a specific master. And the master was not the person reading the clock. Start with the technical history, because the technical history is where the alibi is. Before 1656, the best mechanical clocks in Europe were accurate to within about 15 minutes per day. 15 minutes. A clock that ran 15 minutes fast or slow across a single day would be off by almost 2 hours after a week. In that world, a minute hand would have been meaningless. Even if someone had added one, the clock couldn't support it. The mechanism drifted too much. The minute hand would have pointed to a number that was wrong before the hour was out. 1 hand was honest, 2 would have been a lie. Then, in 1656, a Dutch astronomer named Christian Huygens built the first pendulum clock. The pendulum, swinging at a constant rate determined by its length, regulated the clock mechanism with a precision that no previous system had achieved. Overnight, accuracy improved from 15 minutes per day to 15 seconds per day. A 60-fold improvement, a revolution in precision. The anchor escapement, developed around 1670, refined the mechanism further, reducing the pendulum's swing and allowing longer, slower pendulums that kept even better time. The seconds pendulum, approximately 1 meter long, in which each swing takes exactly 1 second, became the standard. William Clement built the first grandfather clock around 1680 to house these long pendulums, and by 1690, the minute hand appeared on clock faces as a standard feature. The official explanation is simple. The technology finally supported the precision. The pendulum made minutes meaningful. The minute hand was added because it could be. Progress, innovation, the natural march of precision. That explanation is true. It is also the surface, and the surface conceals what was happening on the ground while the clockmakers were fitting their new hands. Because here's the timeline that nobody puts together. The minute hand arrived around 1690. The first English factories appeared in the early to mid-1700s. The Industrial Revolution accelerated through the late 1700s, and by the early 1800s, factory time discipline had restructured the entire relationship between the human body and the working day. As if they were following instructions they didn't fully understand. Before the minute hand, work was measured by the task. The historian E. P. Thompson, in his seminal 1967 paper, time, work discipline, and industrial capitalism documented something that the modern world has completely forgotten. For most of human history, people did not sell their time. They sold their labor. The difference is fundamental. A weaver was paid to produce a bolt of cloth, not to sit at the loom for a specified number of hours. A farmer worked until the field was plowed, not until a clock said to stop. A fisherman went to sea when the tide was right and came back when the catch was in, not when a bell rang. Thompson called this task orientation. The work governed the time. The rhythm of the day was determined by what needed to be done, not by what the clock said. There were busy periods and slow periods, seasonal rushes and seasonal lulls. A cobbler might work intensely for 3 days to fill an order and then take Monday off to recover, a tradition so widespread across pre-industrial England that it had a name: St. Monday, the workers' unofficial holiday, a day of rest, of drinking, of recovery, taken not because a calendar said so, but because the body said so. I want to pause here and ask something that isn't usually asked. What did it feel like to live without minutes? Not without time, without minutes. Without the 60 slices that divide the hour into units so small they can be bought, sold, billed, docked, and monitored. In a world where the clock had one hand and the nearest quarter hour was precise enough, your relationship to time was fundamentally different. You didn't look at a clock and calculate how many minutes until the next thing. You looked at the sun. You felt the rhythm of the task you were performing. You worked until the work was done, not until a hand swept past a number. Time was not a grid. It was a landscape. You moved through it the way you move through terrain, at a pace determined by the ground under your feet, not by a mechanism on the wall. And the boundary between work and rest was not a line drawn at a specific minute. It was a feeling, a sense that the task was done, the body was tired. The day had given what it had. The minute hand ended all of that. Because here's what the factory required. The factory did not produce bolts of cloth by commission. It produced them continuously. The machines ran. The workers attended the machines. And the machines didn't care about tasks or tides or the position of the sun. They cared about time. The factory system needed a unit of labor that was abstract, divisible, and measurable. It needed to buy not the worker's skill or output, but the worker's time. By the hour, by the minute, by the increment. And to buy time by the minute, you needed a minute to exist. The evidence suggests something much larger than a technological improvement. Because look at what the factory owners did with the minute hand once they had it. Thompson documented case after case of factory clocks being manipulated. Owners would speed the clock up during working hours, stretching the minutes, squeezing extra labor from workers who had no watch of their own to contradict the factory timepiece. Then they would slow the clock during meal breaks, cutting the worker's rest period by minutes that accumulated across weeks and months into hours of stolen time. A worker in a Yorkshire factory reported that the factory clock was rigged so that the minute hand dropped 3 minutes at once when it passed a certain point, leaving the workers with 27 minutes of their half-hour break instead of 30. Another worker reported that the factory master ran the clock 10 minutes over time at the end of the day and dared anyone to object. Marx documented the same practice in Capital, charting how factory owners would add 15 minutes at the beginning and end of each day, cut 10 minutes from breakfast and 20 from dinner, accumulating a total of 340 stolen minutes per week. The minute hand wasn't just measuring time, it was a tool for extracting it. The silence was deafening. Now look at what happened to the body, because the body is where the cost was paid. In a task-oriented world, the body regulated itself. You ate when you were hungry. You rested when you were tired. You worked when the work required it. The day had a natural arc, determined by light and energy and the demands of the task. The body and the work were synchronized because the body determined the rhythm. In a time-oriented world, the clock regulated the body. You ate when the bell rang. You rested when the bell rang. You worked when the bell rang. The bell didn't care if you were hungry or tired or finished or not. The bell cared about the minute hand, and the minute hand cared about the shift, and the shift cared about the output, and the output cared about the profit. And somewhere between the body and the profit, the body's own rhythms were overridden by a mechanism that had no interest in the body's needs. Thompson described this as one of the great tragedies of industrialization. The workers didn't reject time discipline. They absorbed it. They learned to fight within it. The first generation was forced to submit to the factory clock. The second generation organized for shorter hours. The third generation fought for overtime pay. They had accepted the categories of their employers. They had agreed that time was money, that work was measured in minutes, that the body's labor was a commodity to be sold in incremental units. They fought for a better price per minute. They never questioned the minute itself. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision across every domain I've examined. A system that measured the human being in relation to natural rhythms, in relation to the task, in relation to the body's own sense of completion, replaced by a system that measured the human being in abstract, divisible, sellable increments. The calendar replaced the moon. The cemetery replaced the ancestors. The birth certificate replaced the naming ceremony. And the minute hand replaced the task. Now consider what the pocket watch meant, because the pocket watch is the resistance chapter, and it's the one Thompson documented with the most precision. When factory owners manipulated the factory clock, the only defense a worker had was to own a timepiece. A worker with a pocket watch could contest the factory clock, could prove the minutes had been stolen, could stand at the end of a shift and say, "Your clock is wrong, and I can prove it." Thompson wrote that the pocket watch was the poor man's bank, an investment of savings that could, in hard times, be sold or put in hock. But more than savings, it was sovereignty. Owning a watch meant owning your own measurement of time, having a minute hand that the employer couldn't manipulate, carrying, in your pocket, the tool of your own surveillance. The deeper I went, the more I found that the pocket watch was to the factory worker what the printing press was to the literate peasant, a technology of power, originally developed to serve institutional needs, appropriated by the people it was used against, and turned into a tool of resistance. But the resistance was always within the system. The workers fought for accurate minutes. They never fought against the existence of minutes. The minute hand had been naturalized within a single generation. By the time workers could afford to own watches, the unit the watch measured had become invisible. Time was minutes. Minutes were time. The idea that time had ever been anything other than a grid of equal, abstract, sellable increments was already impossible to recover. I don't have a complete theory. I have a question that multiplies the deeper I look. Why did the minute hand arrive at the exact historical moment when the factory system needed a divisible, sellable unit of labor? Why did the technology of precision and the economics of industrial production converge in the same generation? Why did factory owners immediately use the minute hand as a tool for extracting unpaid labor through clock manipulation? Why did the pocket watch become the most important possession a working-class family could own? Why did the resistance to time discipline take the form of demanding accurate minutes rather than questioning whether life should be measured in minutes at all? And the question underneath all the others, the one that sits in the space between the hour hand and the minute hand, in the 500 years when only one hand existed and the world functioned without the other. What was life like before the minute? Not before time, before the minute. Before the day was sliced into 1,440 pieces, each one a unit of potential profit. Before the body's rhythms were overridden by a mechanism on the wall. Before the task gave way to the shift, and the shift gave way to the timesheet, and the timesheet became the fundamental document of economic existence. I'll leave you with this. Look at the minute hand on your clock. Watch it move. Each sweep is a container. Inside each container is a piece of your life that someone, somewhere, is measuring. Your employer measures it. Your billing software measures it. Your parking meter measures it. Your microwave measures it. The minute has become so fundamental to modern existence that imagining life without it feels like imagining life without gravity. But the minute hand is 340 years old. The human species is 300,000. For 99.9% of human existence, the minute did not exist. The body worked. The task ended. The day had a rhythm that no mechanism imposed and no employer could manipulate. And the time between waking and sleeping was not a grid of sellable increments, but a landscape you moved through at the pace of your own life. Someone added a hand to the clock, and the landscape became a grid, and the grid became a price, and the price became the way we measure everything, including ourselves. The hand was never yours, it was always counting for someone else.